this person's a dog.
If you hear something moving outside your tent tonight, pretend you didn't. These are the scariest Skinwalker encounters ever told. Let's begin. We all knew how to hunt, read maps, and basic survivals from our father, and saw no reason that we couldn't. Besides, Robert was an adult now. He said the last part dripping with sarcasm, and a sour look spread across his face before continuing with his story. We all packed bags that we used when going out with our father. We packed everything we needed from food to flint for a fire. We all were armed with the silver knives our grandfather had given us when we turned 10. He said that they were made by the settlers of this town and that they would never rust or dull and would protect us. They didn't. We left a note for our parents and left. Robert led us. He was the oldest and carrying holding the map. The map didn't have any specific pathway, and after about 10 or so miles, it was just a dark green blob of the forest. In the forest that the map did not show, we started cutting arrows into trees pointing back home. We left early in the morning, and it was late in the day, I'd say 5-ish, when Robert was happy with the clearing and we made camp. The clearing we chose was small, surrounded by impossibly dense forest to every side. It was a few yards away from the stream, and the woods around us were plentiful with life. After we pitched an old tent, we set out to explore the woods near our new clearing. There was nothing remarkable, just trees and life. The sound of birds and other animals moving about it was a peaceful and beautiful thing. As he described their trek through into the unknown wilderness, the sour expression left his face and was replaced by a mixture of happiness and regret. It was long and tiring to get there, but the clearing made it worth the trip. We all seemed to regain our energy and chased each other around like half of us weren't coming up on adulthood. We had built a fire to cook a squirrel or rabbit that Robert caught for us. Robert was pulling the poor animal over the fire when I first found a sign that something wasn't right in our clearing. His hands turned to fists, and the slightly happy, reminiscent tone that was in his voice vanished. I was walking around the clearing when I saw something sticking out of the ground. I pulled it up. Out the ground, thinking it was odd. It was a whitish rock. I immediately dropped it. It was a jawbone. At the time, I couldn't tell what animal it was from. I'd never seen a human jawbone before, but I am now sure that it was indeed from a human. The jawbone still had a few scraps of graying meat or tissue still attached to it. I told Robert, but he brushed it off, telling me that it had been there a long time, and it was just some other animal's kill, like the one we were about to eat. We ate our kale and went to bed. The jawbone sat in the back of my mind. It worried me, you see, because I cannot say what kind of animal it came from. It never occurred to me. It could be human. I do not know when it was, but I woke up in complete darkness, and it was apparent that something was immediately wrong. The forest around our clearing was completely silent, no nocturnal animals moving through the brush, no insects humming in the trees, no wind rustling in the leaves. It was the June and the forest was completely silent, or so I thought, until I heard the only noise there was to hear, a cracked, scared voice of a woman calling for help. The voice was wrong, the words were right, and logic said that there was a woman out there in need of aid. But it was wrong, like the words were coming out of a throat that was not made to speak human languages. We were all sleeping in the old tents, and as I started to get up, Robert motioned for me to sit back down. I did so, and Robert himself left the tent. He called out to the woman and was greeted by another cry. The fire was still smoldering, and I could see the wood catch as he fed more to the fire. As Robert moved around the clearing, calling for the woman to follow his voice to our fire, the others began to wake. Oliver asked me what the hell was going on. At the same instant, James asked what smelled like rotten eggs. I had no idea what he was talking about, and instead told Oliver and the others about the woman in the woods. Oliver was watching the shadowy image of Robert moving around the tent, and Joe was pulling on his hair, a habit that both the twins had when they were younger and scared. James finally spoke, but his voice was wrong, not his normal excited squeak, and not even nervous stutters. It was a cold, dead-sounding noise that made me think that James knew everything that was going to happen. The sound of that voice coming from my little 10-year-old brother was a terrible thing. That's not a woman, it's a man with horns. Those are the words he spoke, the words that caused my blood to run cold, the words that caused me to leave the tent and join Robert in our clearing. The woman's voice was getting closer, coming from just beyond the north side of our clearing. As she got closer, I realized that the voice was on a loop. The exact same tone, the exact little hiccup after help, and the same sob after me. I think Robert saw it too because he stiffened in front of me and told me to stay behind him. The others had all exited the tent, and Oliver handed me my knife. Neither me nor Robert thought to get them, but Oliver had. And at that moment, I was more happy to have my knife than I was to have anything else. The voice was now just beyond the light of the fire. It turned less and less human as it drew closer, and in the middle of the last cry for help, the words turned into a predatory growl. The shadow that was barely visible in the dark tree line past the fire was that of a hulking and distorted human being. It started to step into our clearing. My grandfather started to shake. His eyes widened and he went as pale as ice. His voice started to fill with fear. It was like he was back in that clearing, watching this monster approach him. "Grandpa!" I tried to pull his attention back to me and away from the horrors of his past. He just kept talking, not even realizing I said anything. The beast stood there, on the other side of the fire. It seemed to be letting us take its appearance in. It was taller than I imagined it could be. Hunched over as it was, I swear that it was at least 8 feet tall. It was standing 2 impossibly long back legs, ending in long, narrow feet that seemed to only have one toe tipped with a terrible dagger-like talon. Its arms staring high up on its shoulders were at its sides. The long fingers at the end of its arms all ended in similar black talons that seemed to absorb the light from the fire. Its claws must have been a foot long. They seemed to be brushing the dirt at its side while it breathed. It was impossibly thin, and its clay-colored skin fit its body so poorly that I could see every bone outline across the entirety of it. It had no hair, and I could see where its genitals should have been. The skin was flat and seamless. I brought my gaze up away from its monstrous body into its deformed face. The skin was pulled just as tightly around its skull as it was around the rest of its body. Its faces resembled humans, while at the same time being completely wrong. It had no lips, just deep grooves where they should have been. This absence revealed a mouth full of crooked needle-like teeth and a long, dark blue tongue hanging out one side of its mouth, black saliva rolling down it like a sap from a tree. Its eyes were the worst part, like an owl's, but sunken deep into its skull. They were bright yellow. It seemed to me that the firelight caused them to glow, giving off a minuscule amount of light of their own. The smell of death quickly filled and cleared, steaming from the thing that had entered. For what seemed like an endless amount of time we stood there, me and my brother on one side of the fire and this monster on another. We studied it while it studied us, no one moving. I tightened my grip on my knife. I wanted some kind of magic protection between me and this thing. Then the spell was broken. We moved fast. Robert stepped backwards, and his foot landed right on a stick, and the monster let out a blood-curdling yell. Oliver dropped the rest of the knives, never having the chance to give them to the others. Joe screamed and started to turn away from the beast. Robert swore and started backing up faster. James stood watching the monster as it screamed into the air and jolted forward. It moved fast, impossibly fast, faster than anything I had ever seen. As it came for us, it brought one talent hand up. And the next thing I knew was that the arm Robert had started raising to protect his face was missing half a foot of itself. Joe was running with Oliver not far behind. James was still standing, staring at the beast as its mouth full of crooked needles closed around Robert's throat. I grabbed James by the arm and started to drag him with me. I did not need to drag him far as he started running as fast as he could on his own. I kept hearing ripping noises from behind me, but I kept running behind the others, trying to keep them all in sight. The tearing noises stopped, and around me the wind picked up out of nowhere. The wind was blowing from behind us, from the clearing. It was pushing us along, blowing leaves to chase us, bending trees to look down at us, severing branches from trunks to attack us. Though the wind roared in my ears, I could hear the crack of the branch and thought of the cloud of dirt and leaves blocking my vision. I could hear the branch strike Joe ahead of me. He had started crying when he described how the monster lunged at Robert. He continued crying and told me Oliver and James had ran ahead. I had to shove James forward to keep him from stopping for Joe. I stopped for him, threw the branch off him and stopped. He was breathing still, short and uneven breaths, but still breathing. The branch hadn't killed him, but it had broken his skull. I did not know what I should do, but neither did I have any time to think about it. The wind had passed me, and even though I could still see its ripping branches of trees in the pursuit of my brothers, the smell of death was suddenly in my nose again, all around me, never ending. A growl filled my ears, and an impossibly solid, impossibly skinny, impossibly strong stick hit me in the back and sent me flying. To this day, I do not know why I did not die after it. Threw me across the forest floor. Somehow, I did not splatter against a tree or fall onto rocks. The blow did not break my back, though it should have, as its talons did not slash me in half like I was made of paper. Somehow, I fell 10 or 15 feet away from the monster that had pulled about Joe's head and started devouring its contents completely unharmed. I wish I had yelled, tried to do anything to save Joe, to save Robert, but I did nothing. I turned away from the monster and its feast, and I ran. I ran in the direction I thought James and Oliver went, and in a matter of moments I saw them, ahead and to the right of me, running faster than I thought anyone as small as them could possibly go. I called up to them and we ran until we reached a wide open moving river that we could not possibly cross. The wind had died down. It was no longer a powerful gale, but a light breeze carrying a haunting siren that seemed to emanate from the deepest part of the forest. The siren got louder, more consistent, and the wind picked up, freezing cold despite the fact that it was the June. It was there, seemingly appearing with the wind, not a foot behind Oliver. Before I fully comprehended the figure behind Oliver, he grabbed him, one arm wrapped around his middle, the other his arm, cutting into his arm. In one moment, Oliver's arms were ripped from his body and the monstrous claw disabled him. Oliver fell into the river with his organs sliding into the ground. James and I looking on in horror as the beast, he stopped talking. No longer able to continue through his emotions, they had tried to comfort him, but he never even noticed that I was still there with him. A few moments after he continued, I ran at that bastard with my knife in my hand yelling. I wasn't thinking, I just knew I needed to kill it. It swatted me like a bug. I flew into the base of a tree, but somehow I was still unhurt. I sat against the trunk of the tree looking at the knife in my hands, dazed before something thick and warm dripped onto the back of my neck. I looked up into the distorted evil face 6 inches from my arm. Its eyes were a bright fluorescent yellow, and they really did give off their own light. They were sitting in what looked like a congealed blood, never blinking, and its pupils were like pinpoints. Blood covered its needle-filled mouth and dripped down its dark tongue, mixing with its black saliva. It started reaching for me. Without thinking, I brought my knife up, slashing its face and cutting through one glowing yellow eye. The beast screamed in pain before rushing backwards. Its face was smoking where I parted its skin. I took the opportunity to run, passing Oliver's corpse and grabbing James's arm one last time to pull him with me. Unlike earlier, James was frozen. He allowed himself to be dragged, but would not run on his own. I dragged him through the woods. All the wild paint howls possessed the air around us. It took us hours, but I had thought that we had gotten away. It was still too early in the morning to see much, and I sat James under a tree so we could rest a short while. James told me he had seen the monster in his dreams before. He said 3 days before we left, he dreamt that Robert, Oliver, and Joe would be cut to ribbons, and that he, James, would be left running through the woods screaming how his feet were going to burn him up. He had trouble telling me this because he was weeping almost uncontrollably, but somehow he got to sleep still weeping. The last thing he asked me was, why do I still smell rotting meat? He never gave me time to answer. James was plagued with terrible night terrors that caused him to scream out and talk incomprehensibly in his sleep. Nothing I did could wake him or calm him down, and eventually I must start to doze. The next thing that I knew, my ears are full of screaming louder and further away, all at once than they were a moment ago. It was James screaming, and I quickly saw that his clothing, which were illuminated by the first light of the morning, was strewn across the ground in a small path leading away from where I had been sleeping. I started following the clothing and saw James yards away, running faster than he had at any other point that night, screaming at the top of his lungs. I ran after him, and for a time I was gaining. As I got close, I could hear him saying, "It's so hot, it's burning me up." I was almost on him. I was going to grab him, but he jumped over a pit, and I didn't quite see it until my foot got caught in it. I fell, twisted my ankle, and hit my head on a log. James screamed about the thing burning him up, and it was the last thing I heard before I fell unconscious. He stopped speaking, and I waited a few moments for him to continue, but he didn't. "What happened?" I finally asked. He started, seemingly forgetting that he was telling me this story. He stood up and told me to follow him. We left my room, descended the stairs, crossed through the living room, and entered my grandfather's room. The walls were covered in paintings of dark woods that my grandfather had illustrated. The painting that I never really thought about before looked strangely ominous. He had been deathly quiet all the while we were walking to his room, but as he opened up his closet and started rummaging through it, he spoke again after going back to where we had slept. I collected Jin's clothing and the knife that I had left behind when chasing after him. The sun was almost directly overhead when I finally limped back into the trees we had carved arrows into. It was starting to get dark again when I made it back to the house. We never found James or any remains of the others, and within a year I left this terrible town we live in. I left to study the occult, to study the monster that attacked us. When I discovered its name, what it could do, everything from that night made sense. It was a Wendigo, a deformed cannibalistic human spirit made into a monster. It consumes human flesh. It can mimic human voice and control the weather. It's a monster of unimaginable strength and speed. It tears people apart and can make them go mad with fever. I think that's what happened to James. After years, I came back here hoping to find it to kill it. How did you know it wasn't already dead? I knew it was still alive, you see, because they can live for hundreds of years before the spirit moves on and possesses a new host, corrupting them and either merging with a new soul or destroying it. He uncovered an old wooden trunk that was covered by years of junk piling up in the back of the closet. He was having trouble pulling the trunk out of the closet, so I got up and helped. As we worked, he spoke. I spent years looking for this monster, going into the woods, searching for the Wendigo, but I never found him. Sometime in my 20s, I found the silver knives that we had left behind in the clearing. I found other things too, body parts and trees, a cave where I think it once lived, cuts in trees and rocks left by its terrors, but never the beast. We got the trunk out and used an old key on a string from around his neck to open it. Inside was an old revolver, a sheathed knife, and 3 leather-bound journals and countless pencil drawings. My grandfather motioned for me to look through the trunk contents. I had an old acquaintance of mine melt down my brother's knives and turn the melted silver into bullets. I wanted to use those bullets to kill it. I put the gun down carefully on the bed and picked up the knife. The sheath was well made, leather dyed a dark blue with golden symbols sewn into it. The sheath was obviously newer than the knife whose leather hilt was old and worn by use and age. I unsheathed it, revealing a silver blade as sharp and embellished as the day it was made. My grandfather was right. The knife never rusted or lost its edge, and I carried it with me every day for over 20 years. Resheathing the knife and placing it next to the revolver, I took up the 3 journals. In those, I wrote down everything I learned about the mysteries of the world. They contain information on many mythical items and people that I encountered. I always wanted to give them to your dad, but he never accepted the truth of our world. It broke my heart when he refused them. Unopened, I set the journals down in a stack next to me. Taking one of the many stacks of drawings and shifting slowly through them, one of the drawings showed a creature like the one my grandfather had described, the Wendigo. But others showed images of people with fangs, living trees, creatures with the faces of different animals, spirits, and ghouls. A few showed not monsters, but men, women, and children, all massacred in various ways. About halfway through the stack, I put it down and looked up at my grandfather. He was watching me, studying my reaction, trying to see if I believed what my father refused to. "Are all of these real?" I asked quietly. "All of those are not only real, but things I fought. There are more than just Wendigos out in the world. Countless evils share this plane of existence with us, and I've come across many here in my time. After each battle, I would draw the monster that was my opponent. It helped me cope with what had happened and what I need to do. When I did not save a victim, I drew them as I found them as a way to remember them and to strengthen my resolve to save the victims of the next monster. I started to put all of the items back into the trunk before pushing it back into the depths of the closet again. I did not tell you all this so you could rush out and try and find that Wendigo, those woods, and the beast that stole my brother's lives and destroyed mine. I do not want that for you. I told you so you know what's out there, the thing that preys on humanity even though it's not my purpose. If you ever decide you need to know more about the things out there, then go through my journals, call my old contacts. They already know you might reach out. Before anything else was said, my father entered the room. Furious, he sent me out. Before I even closed the door, he was yelling at my grandfather for poisoning me with those ludicrous monsters of his. I did not ever speak about the Wendigo or any other monster to my grandfather again. I did not know what I wanted to do. I couldn't go back to the innocent childhood that I had been enjoying before our tour. I couldn't just march off to kill monsters either. I didn't want to die like my great uncles, and I had not developed my need to save others. 2 or so weeks after I learned about the Wendigo, my grandfather walked into the woods and never returned. When I realized where he had gone and that he would not be returning, I rushed into his room. I once again pulled out the trunk, meaning to break open the lock if I had to, but there was no need. Resting on top of the trunk were 2 items, the key and the note. I read the note first. To my only grandson, I have decided to find the Wendigo that murdered my family. I do not plan to kill it. I do not think I'm able to. Instead, I plan to let it kill me so that when I see my brothers again, we will be on equal footing. We will have known the same hardship and the same death. I feel the need to see that monster one more time, and this is the only time left. I'm leaving you everything in this trunk. Do with it what you will. Do not be controlled by revenge like I was. If you try to hunt down the monster, do it for the living and not for the dead. I know that you were a better man at 16 than I ever was, and I love you for it. Goodbye, my grandson. Love, Grandpa. I read his note 3 times before carefully folding it up and putting it in my pocket. I unlocked the trunk and opened it. Everything was exactly where I had put it weeks before. The revolver and the knife were still untouched. My grandfather brought no form of protection with him to face the Wendigo. I reached for the gun, intending to run after him and fight the Wendigo to save him, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up his first journal and stumbled through it until I came across a list of names. Each name was accompanied by a phone number, and I realized that these were my grandfather's contacts. In the 24 hours that followed, I called every number in that list and started forming my own journey to leave my little hometown and learn the truth of this world. 5 years have passed since I left home, and I've only been back for a week. In that week, my room has changed a lot. The comic books are gone, so are the fantasy novels, the piles of homework, the toys I used to play with, even the animals I used to carve are missing from my shelves. In their place, 3 newer wood carving set, a horned snake with 2 tails, a man with tattered wings and the leg of a goat, and a dog with 3 heads. Levels. These 3 carvings are all the images of the 3 monsters I have killed since leaving here. At the foot of my bed, there's a trunk containing 3 old journals, a revolver, a silver knife with a new leather grip to match its sheath, as well as old books. One of which is specifically about the legend of the Wendigo, and 2 new knives, one of silver and one of iron. In front of me is my very own journal. Inside is the note that my grandfather wrote for me. The details of all 3 of my other hunts and this entry. I'm writing this in here because I'm going to enter the forest tonight and kill the Wendigo. I plan to leave this here in case I do not return so that my family will know what happened to me. Whether I live or die, I want you to know that I have a life I'm proud of. I've saved lives and have made this world a little safer and filled with fewer monsters than when I found it. I do not plan for this hunt to be my last and will do my damnedest to come back for this journal, but I know it doesn't mean I will. I love you all, Dean Gray. I live in Russia, and my encounter happened around a year ago in February. I was walking by the embankment at 10 p.m. It was already dark and nobody was around. There is a road which has 3 levels of big street, then it goes down into a smaller one, and finally the embankment which turns into a small path through thick snow. Just imagine, you're walking through a little forest and on the right there is a river. So I was walking on the path when I saw this man. His whole appearance alarmed me instantly. He had skis on but was trying to walk as he was without them. In the deep snow, it was around his knee level, and I saw how much effort it took for him not to fall and carry on moving. There was no way to avoid this person because it was a tiny path through the snow. He was staring at me, smiling. I'm unsure if it was in a predatory way, but something was strange in the smile. I thought, well, if anything happens, I can push him and run and carry on moving. When I was right next to him, this happened. Everything took place in about 3 seconds. I was watching his every move with my side vision, and in one moment, he vanished. There was nowhere to hide. The trees give you at least 100 meters worth of visibility, and hiding in the snow isn't an option. You would be visible regardless. He was gone. I slightly turned my head to that direction when I captured something right behind me. A stick man. It was absolutely black, around my height, maybe a bit taller, very thin, with a big head and no neck at all. It was standing in a very threatening position, with its arms set apart like an animal preparing to attack. This figure looked like a picture printed straight onto the air. I thought the 2D object should be material at some point with the thickness of a sheet of paper, for example. But no, this looked entirely different. I turned my head away and started running to the second level of the road. When I got there, I looked back. This thing was peeking out of a tree, and when I spotted it, it hid behind it. At this point, I really thought that I was going to die for sure, and when I got to the third level, some cars were driving by, so it calmed me down a little. I looked back. The stick man was standing in the spot where I was a second ago, right in the middle of the road. The whole landscape looked so unreal that at some point, I questioned my sanity. This time, I kept the contact and tried to examine the thing. The stick man was slightly moving back and forth, but its whole body had a very stable, dark black figure. I got a feeling, the feeling saying that I shouldn't be seeing this, that my survival instincts were blurring out of my mind, that were telling me to flee. If you're still listening with the lights off, you're braver than most. If you're enjoying the stories, hit that like button and consider subscribing. It really helps us keep the nightmares coming. And it was also a feeling like he's found me. Imagine the feeling when you play hide and seek and your cousin is very slow finding anyone, so you sit somewhere for 20 minutes. At first, you feel the pleasure from the game, but then as time drags on, you get bored. And when they finally find you, it's almost like a relief. I think that something tried to stop me from walking away, because at some point there was a little desire to approach it. Anyway, it was obvious that it was following me, and the thing is, I lived very close to that area. I didn't know what to do, either to wander through the streets so it would lose me or go directly home, but this thing would know where I lived. I decided to run to safety immediately without looking back. And yes, that wasn't the end. That night, I had sleep paralysis. I remember laying in bed, listening to the sound of water from my aquarium when it suddenly stopped. I thought someone was trying to grab my attention, so I opened my eyes, and right next to the bed was the same black figure. This was it, the end of my life. I literally saw my entire existence flash before my eyes. It stood 3 feet away from me, and then it turned into fog and started to fill my lungs through my nose and throat. When it was entirely in my body, I awoke, or I didn't sleep at all. I don't know. The thing is, I haven't noticed any difference with myself since. This whole encounter was very different from anything I've seen in my life. There are things you've never experienced before, so you don't actually know what to think or feel, and are filled with curiosity. I am low-key disturbed. Would I one day find myself in the middle of nowhere, approaching a random person experience? And if anyone has encountered anything similar, I'd love to hear about it so that I know I'm not the only one. This was just last year. I had moved from New York to Vermont and decided to rent a home for a few months that allowed my cat and dog while I waited to close on my new home in Vermont. Last year, it was particularly snowy, and this house was located up a small mountain off a dirt road. If 10 cars passed on the road during the day, that was a busy day. I thought it was closer to the village when I first booked it through Zillow, but I wasn't looking to go anywhere really, but to instead heal, rest up, and relax from what already had been an exhausting ordeal and moving experience. I had some guy friends who would help me get up there, and they left after one night. I was told not to let my dog run without a leash, as there were a few alpacas at the next door farm who may attack my dog, which was at least 1/8 of a mile walking distance away. Not that my aging dog was going anywhere too quickly, he was 17 at the time and could barely walk anymore. He was one of those awesome, really great dogs you may be lucky to have once or twice in your life. Got along with everything and anyone. The next door neighbor after that was at least a mile down the road. As I settled into this lovely one-story home, the house had automated motion detectors that would light up the driveway that ran behind the house. There stood a huge ancient apple tree that still had some apples on it way high up, even in March, and your usual pine and birch trees surrounding the property. The large front and back lawn areas, being several acres in size, are surrounded by forests and old rock walls. I grew up in an area in New York where I was surrounded by trees and forests, so I wasn't spooked until the second night. The house had a large pond out front, which was covered in ice and snow. There was literally at least 4 feet of snow on the ground, with just enough of the driveway plowed to get your car in and out. I backed my car by the back door, and there were several outbuildings too on the property. One building in particular was perhaps 30 feet from the back door of the house that you could go through the kitchen to get to. In this open garage-like building, it looked to be used like a large garden storage area. There were no doors, just an open area. Off the kitchen was a screened-in porch that faced the pond out front. So on the second night, I take my dog, put him on the leash. It's 8 p.m. I'm pitch black outside. Fresh, fluffy snow of about 1 foot has fallen, and me being a silly New Yorker with just sneakers without any socks and my nightgown and a light jacket. I walk out the back door with my dog in tow, thinking I'd only be out for a few minutes. I walked him slowly to do his business as I was soon readying to get to bed. As I returned to the door, I soon realized I had inadvertently locked myself out of the house. Oh no. It was one of those types of doorknobs that you twist in one direction and it will lock itself. I tried not to panic, but it was cold, and there I am looking silly and thought perhaps, I could walk to the neighbor's house. But I had no flashlight, no cell phone, and felt I would break an ankle trying to manage to walk in the dark. That's when I remembered I saw something in the open garage-like building. It was a crowbar. I thought I could do one of those MacGyver moves. I've seen enough window break-ins on TV and want to take my dog's leash and tie it around my car's left mirror. I knew I would only be losing my deposit at this point, and I'd have to pay for the damage, but heck, I'm stuck outside with no key and freezing temperatures without any way of even getting into my car to stay in the night with the dog. I go grab the crowbar, and with little hesitancy and then with full vigor, I took said crowbar facing away, swung it at the glass as hard as I could. It bounced off, making the loudest sound that just echoed in the night, and it even sparked. Now, first of all, what kind of window doesn't break? Mind you, I'm a strong gal, but this was like bulletproof glass on safety glass. Then I thought, well, since perhaps it's a safety feature, let me try another window. I chose another one to the left after surveying it. I could probably get to climb in. And again, same issue. I was like, forget this. There has to be another solution. That's when I remembered the screened-in porch that's off the kitchen. And I thought, well, perhaps I could get to the screened porch door that leads outside. And if the door to the kitchen was still unlocked, well, I'd only have to pay for the ripped screen. Much easier than to repair a broken window. So I go, and there's at least a 15-inch path of snow that must be cleared for me to even access that screen door. So I go to the garage and grab the shovel I saw earlier. My hands and legs getting colder with every moment, and I start to clear the snow shoveling as quickly as I can. At the time, my dog is barking because he can't see me around the corner. His barks echo off the back of the mountain that's beyond the forest and the backyard. I keep yelling at him to quieten down. When I no longer hear him, I don't think about it too much because I have to get inside and figured he'd just calm down. Finally, I reach the screen door, and I'm super grateful it's unlocked. I squeeze my way through, pushing more snow out the way, and make my way to access the kitchen door, hoping all the while I haven't locked it, and to my relief, it's unlocked. I run through the kitchen, go out the back door to the door from which I got locked out of to grab my dog, not without grabbing my keys this time. I look at the mirror of the car, and my dog's not there. His leash just hangs there, and it looks like it's been torn. I start to freak out, like I need any more troubles tonight. I start to walk around the back of the house, and there's my old dog, happily having done his business, just wallowing his way back to me. I am one very relieved chick. I tie the leash into a knot so that I can use it the next day. It's one of those retractable leashes made for dogs that are over 100 pounds and is at least an inch wide. How he tore or chewed through it that quickly, I often wonder. Finally, I get to bed and vow to never leave the house without keys in my hand. The next night is when Bigfoot decides to tell me they're in the neighborhood. I go out again at 8 p.m. It's a clear night, and I'm staring up at the stars in disbelief at how pretty it all is. I'm seeing constellations I've never seen after years of living in New York. I'm standing at the back of the house in front of a large picture window that looks out towards the backyard and mountain with an open garage at my 3 o'clock position to my right. I was only there for a minute or two when I heard the first knock in the 2 o'clock position and another one coming from the 11 o'clock position from where I'm standing. They were single, very clear knock noises, very much just like the ones I had made the night before while trying to get back into the house by trying to break back into the house through the windows. When I heard the noise, they were very distinctive. I know the sounds that trees make when they sway. This wasn't trees swaying. In fact, it was no wind at all that night. You know, I hightailed it back inside the house in seconds flat, and I locked the door. Next night, I'm thinking it's okay, but what would happen next scared me to bits. I'm doing the usual routine of walking the dog just down the driveway. I've now learned where the lights are for the outside, so I make sure they are all on. It's icy, and I'm using a ski pole to help me walk safely with the flashlight. The house keys are in my jacket pocket while I walk the dog for his last evening walk. As I start to return to the back kitchen door, I look beyond the open garage outbuilding because a pop of color caught my eye. That's when I saw a pair of really large red eyes looking back at me at the edge of where the yard ends with a rock wall abutting the forest. Perhaps now, I think, as I continue to look. I move and shift my body left to right, thinking it must be a reflector, something that's catching the lights. I would be good with an explanation, but no, it was eyes. Big red eyes staring straight and watching me. What got me most was how wide apart they are. They were about 100 to 20 feet from where I was standing. They looked at least 10 inches apart. I didn't even want to imagine how big whatever it was that was looking at me could be. I stood there for at least a minute because I was waiting for it to move until I couldn't comprehend what I was looking at, so I scurried back into the house. The next day I went out and looked again at that area from which I saw eyes looking back at me. Carefully even venturing out into the deep snow for about 30 feet to see if perhaps it was something like reflectors or tin cans. I even retrieved the binoculars, came back out, and I couldn't see anything except for the rock wall, forest, and the sounds of birds chirping happily. As I stayed there for 3 or 4 more weeks, I never saw those eyes or whatever was reflecting again. This isn't my first experience with a possible Bigfoot, as I have 2 others, but these happened in New York. But yes, people, there are odd things up in the mountains in Chester, Vermont, and it wasn't a mountain lion, nor wolf, nor coyote. But to hear that knocking and then those big, red, glowing eyes the next day. I kept my night walking the dog very short after that, and I never left the house after dark for any other reason. I can assure you I felt like I was being watched several times after those first few nights. I didn't fear anything, but it was more like they were curious and watching out. The kicker, there was a key hanging right above the shovel I grabbed that first night that would have gained my access back into the house immediately. And yes, I got my entire security deposit back. I adored that house, by the way. And I haven't shared this story much, but my MacGyver days are over, that's for sure. Years ago, when I was 13 years old, I went on a trip to celebrate Easter with my mom's family. It was a tradition for us to go have a picnic in the middle of a big field, 40 minutes from my grandma's house. The field is basically in the middle of nowhere in rural Mexico. That day, my cousins and I got very curious about a small hill we could see from the field. It always caught our attention because it looks like a giant took a big bite out of it. I know it used to work as a rock mine several years prior. And anyway, we decided to go investigate and left the picnic. We walked for 20 minutes until we crossed a road and went up a hill. Once there, we started looking for a way to trespass a metallic fence that kept us from going into the actual mine, and eventually we found a hole in it. My cousin was recording with her cell phone as we were making jokes and acting like normal cringy teenagers when suddenly she froze and whispered, "Hey, there's something in the rocks," and she pointed her camera to the rock wall behind us. At first thought she was joking, but something about her expression seemed off, so I turned back and there was a human dog-like hybrid looking at us from a hole in the rocks. about 20 to 30 meters above the ground. It had pink, pale, and wrinkly skin and a long snout and long ears, white eyes, and hands with long fingernails. It had no hair, and it kept still just watching us. After what felt like an eternity, the weird creature finally went into the hole again, and we started running back to the picnic spot. We showed the video to our family right after being scolded for going so far without saying anything to anyone, but you could barely see anything on the video. After all these years, I still don't know what that thing was, and I get goosebumps when I think about it. The mother of my best friend had a brother working on that mine in the 70s or so, and she claims that he and other workers died there, but the families never got the bodies back. Apparently, rocks collapsed multiple times, killing the people working and making it very difficult to retrieve the corpses. Well, that's what the owners of the mine said to all the families involved. After a few incidents, they decided to close the mine for good. I was driving around my friend's old neighborhood, keeping an eye on the place as it's quite a hotspot for the paranormal and supernatural. On one such instance is when he and I were walking down a street. The sun was setting and the evening breeze glided through the trees, all the while as a peaceful, heavy, and suffocating reality filled the atmosphere. Just as a shiver went up my back, he turned to the edge of the woods, and I followed suit soon after. As if on cue, a man's yell, painful and full of agony, broke the eerie serenity of the evening. Now on edge, as this type of thing happens from time to time, we pick up our pace and walk briskly, as his home was just 10 minutes from where we were. Oh, we knew anything could happen between here and there if we weren't careful. About 5 minutes away now, another yell boomed from the woods, but this time it altered from before, becoming more and more animalistic as it dragged on. We picked up our pace again, the daylight almost completely gone, and finally reached his front porch. And that's when we heard it behind us. In the wood line, we heard a screech, an awful combination of a rooster's crow, a goat's bleat, and a dog's bark. After that, whatever it was hissed and began coming towards us quickly. The leaves in the trees rustled as it got closer and closer, jumping down from the branches and into the brush of the bushes and smaller trees. It came crashing towards us and just stopped before it broke out of the tree cover, breathing heavily and pointing its bony clawed fingers out of the brush and to us, curling it in motion as if to tempt us to come closer. After that, my friend unlocked his door and swung it open, both of us stumbling inside and slamming it shut behind us. As soon as we did, whatever that thing was, slammed up against it and tried to break it down. If not, at the very least, frightening us. It then sounded as if it jumped from his porch and back into a tree, dashing back into the woods. Later on that night, we heard some occasional scratching as well as tapping on the windows and other parts of the house, but we didn't bother to open the blinds for obvious reasons. Thankfully, we had the pleasure to not see what it looked like, but did have the misfortune of hearing it screech and seeing its clawed, bony, thin fingers. That's just one of the many uncomfortable yet equally exciting experiences we've had together. He and I are sensitive to things like this, and as such, from what we've determined, after so many encounters with haunting and breathtaking, dauntless beings are seen as something curious in their eyes that we may either hinder or help. Anywho, if you want a good time, be sure to visit Holbrook, South Carolina. It's in Dorchester County, a quaint and quiet little neighborhood. Unfortunately, most of it has been destroyed for housing development, but that doesn't exactly restrain the odd things from occurring. Just be on your guard and stay safe. In college, I lived up on top of a mountain road, but still only 5 minutes to tow down a trail through the woods. There was a 100-plus-year-old oak in the yard, slab stone porch built by hand. I lived in the studio apartment that was outside the main house. The main house was haunted, but my shack was cozy. The woods up there were weird too. I've never really been in the main house after all, but the three who lived there said some nights you couldn't sleep from all the noise. The floorboards creaking, the thumps and knocks. My experiences happened outside. Like I said, I hunted small game up there, as there must have been a rabbit colony in the facility, plus a few squirrel drays. Often out there while I was stalking, I'd get the distinct feeling of being stalked myself. Keep in mind, this stand of forest is only several acres, but it was preserved mainly because of the historic oak trees scattered about. It's old woods. I would hear laughter like children's laughter, but not quite like in a creepy movie. It was a bit distorted and almost like flirty giggles that you might imagine a fairy make. It would come from a different location each time I saw it. Then I eventually decided to stop following it and hunt. It never did stop. I would sometimes spend an afternoon in town having drinks or hanging at my friend's place. I'd finally leave and have enough liquid courage to hike back up the trail in the dark. That laughter would be replaced by noise, just like things running all around you and dashing about the trees. I've been an outdoorsman for a long time, and I know the woods are noisy at night, particularly in the southern Appalachians. But this was different. It was dead silent out there in that stand at night, except for this rushing to and from by some unseen feet. Not like game fleeing deer, run away and crash about doing it. These steps were like something or things running swift. Running swift were like something or things running swift. Like it would cross the trail ahead and then behind me and then alongside me, but I would never see it. I was a big-time night owl back then and was regularly up doing schoolwork until 3 or 4 a.m. One such night, it had just snowed a fresh 20 inches or so, decent accumulation for the area. Our yard and the woods were like a paradise for me and my dog. I was excited to hunt around the next day for tracks and see if I could locate the rabbit then precisely. I was up working and the dog came scratching to get me. Not frantic or anything. I let her in, she lay down to sleep. Odd because she's a husky and preferred the snow to my tiny heated apartment every time. I decided to call a night too and went out for a cigarette. It was 3:24 a.m. I can still see it on the top of my MacBook display before I closed it. I went out, noted the clouds were dispersed a bit more and the moon was bright on the snow. I lit my cigarette and was just looking out across the fence and into the woods when something caught my eye. It looked like a silhouette of someone leaning against one of those big oak trees, like you'd see someone with a palm planted against the wall with one arm straight out leaning against it. It's not moving, so I can't tell if I'm just tired or if the lighting is funny or what, so I walked further to the end of the porch, and as soon as I stepped onto the fresh snow there, it took off. The thing was tall. My estimates based on the tree put the thing at 7 feet tall. It ran along the border of the fence and back off into the woods. It was hairless as far as I could tell, and completely naked. Otherwise, though, its form was just that of a skinny, tall man. I went inside and switched to boots, grabbed my rifle and my flashlight, and I went to check the tracks. I picked up a set of what had to be at least a size 14 or 15 barefoot. It ran along the fence and down the treeless stretch of backyard as if heading into the woods, but then the tracks ended about 20 inches short of the wood line. I don't know if they managed to jump to the tree line. Probably because there weren't any more tracks that I could find that night or the next day. It's like it just completely vanished after that. I'm a native in the Kiowa tribe. Whether this has any bearing on the occurrence that I'm about to describe, I don't know. It's merely for descriptive purposes. In any case, I grew up in a housing addition where most of the Kiowas in my hometown live since the addition was built. There were several other kids my age who lived there as well. It consists of 3 streets connected by 2 streets on either side. My grandma lives on one of the corners at the end of the middle street. The street that connects all 3 main streets is bordered by a standard-sized farmer barbed wire fence with farmers' properties on either side. There's a street lamp on the corner just outside my grandma's house. One night when I was about 15 or so, I was out under that lamp with 2 friends, talking and joking and whatnot. Suddenly, I noticed an animal-like figure sitting by the fence in the corner where the other main street starts. There's a street lamp and there's a well, but the figure was sitting in a spot that was obscured by shadows caused by a couple of large trees with overhanging branches. It is facing away from the fence. It's very still and makes no sound. It appears to be all black, sits on its hind legs like a canine, and I can clearly see into its eyes, emitting a soft yellow glow. I pointed out to my friend and asked, "What is that?" They turned to look and we all stared, trying to make sense of it. It looked straight at us for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. Then in one fluid motion, turning while it jumps over the fence, which is a good 5 feet high, it disappears into the darkness, making no sound, though there was only tall grass and fallen leaves and branches on the other side of the fence. Needless to say, we noped right out of there and went to my friend's grandma's house on the street on the far end of where we saw the creature. My family was at powwow, so nobody was at my grandma's house, and there was no way I was staying there alone after that. We told my friend's grandma what we saw, and she told us there are many mysterious things in the dark in the area of Oklahoma, and that we should just be glad that it wasn't malignant. There are many strange things that happen out there. I've grown up with loads more stories from aunts, uncles, and grandparents. I don't think I want to know what it was. Wyoming is one of the largest states in America, covering nearly 98,000 square miles. Despite its size, Wyoming has less than 600,000 residents, making it one of the least populated states in the U.S. Its history is rich and is as dark as the coal that fills the endless stream of boxcars winding their way across the western plains. Many battles and a great deal of blood has been shed by both the white man and the Native Americans in the fight over the lands and its resources. So as you can well imagine, many residents believe the land is cursed. There are countless stories of paranormal activity, from ghost encounters, Bigfoot sightings, to skinwalkers and cryptids alike, not to mention stories of UFOs and alien abductions. This story, however, is not about spirits or anything of that nature. As a kid, my family would often go camping at Lake DeSmet, just outside of Buffalo. These camping trips often included taking the boat out for some water skiing and or fishing. On one particular trip, my father and I were fishing in the middle of the lake. The water was so calm and still, it almost resembled glass. The glare from the midsummer sun's reflection off the water was nearly blinding. Still, we talked lazily about everything and nothing. I recall my father commenting on the fact he thought it was rather strange the fish were not biting at all. He stated it as if something had scared them away. I didn't give what he said much thought, as I was preoccupied by the sudden ripples that began to dance across the water, giving the lake's surface a funhouse mirror effect. I recall thinking it was rather odd for this to be occurring, considering there was no boat or anyone in sight for that matter. My heart began to pound in my chest as the ripples soon turned to waves that slapped against the side of the boat with enough force to cause it to rock back and forth. Judging from the look on my father's face, I could tell he too was feeling uneasy about the current situation. "Dad, are you seeing this?" I asked, trying to keep the fear from creeping into my voice. "I am," is all he could say, his eyes nervously scanning the lake. I should point out that the lake is said to have a depth of 70 feet on average and 30 feet at its deepest. Others say no one knows how deep it truly is. There are countless stories regarding a creature known as Smetty. Descriptions of the cryptid are as varied as the sightings. Some describe it as a giant eel with a horse-like head, while others say it resembled an enormous alligator. Most witnesses describe the monster as a classic Loch Ness Monster-style creature. Now keep in mind, I had heard all of the stories and truly believed they were just tall tales. However, all the doubt I had was blown out of the water as I watched what looked like the head and neck of a massive sea monster rise out of the depths about 50 yards from the boat. As we watched in silence, the creature lazily drifted across the water as if it didn't have a care in the world. Needless to say, my father and I were peeing ourselves with excitement and fear. It was my father that first broke the silence. "Well, I'll be damned. It does exist." Yeah, neither of us had thought to bring a camera, so there was no way to capture a picture of the encounter. To be honest, even if we would have, we were both so shaken, I doubt either of us would have gotten a decent picture at all. We just sat there staring in awe and disbelief for what seemed like hours. In truth, the whole encounter lasted maybe all of 2 minutes before the lake creature disappeared beneath the lake's surface. My father and I looked at one another without speaking and quickly began reeling in our lines. "Well, I guess I know why the fish weren't biting," I pointed out. "Indeed," my father replied with a slight shiver. "I think it's time for us to get the hell out of this lake," he suggested. I nodded my head in agreement, and without another word to my father, cranked the boat's motor and we hauled ours back to shore, cautiously keeping an eye out for the monster. I've been back to Lake DeSmet many times since and have yet to see the creature again. However, sightings and stories continue to circulate. Although there is no actual proof that Smetty exists, I know without a doubt that it indeed does. If any of you have seen it or heard about this elusive creature, I would love to hear from you down below. This story happened during my teenage years. I lived in a small town of 2,000 people, mainly surrounded by boreal forest in Canada. This place was great as we often saw deers, and it was usually a quiet and safe place. To put a bit of context, my house was located at the side of a dead end, and the only light source at night was my house. There was a single street light at the end of the road, but it only lighted up a part of the street and the forest behind it. We were a dog family. I only had small dogs when I lived there. Every day, we needed to let them out to pee, as all dogs do, but at night, they were almost impossible to see because of the darkness. Our terrain was kind of big and the light sources were weak. I was a gamer at that time and often stayed up late, so I was the one who needed to take out the dog to be at 2 a.m. because it stayed with me while I was playing. One night, I opened the door and waited for my dog to do his thing. While trying to look at it, I was only able to see the reflection on the light and its size when it looked at me. I started to look around because there were sometimes deer sleeping in the wood, under the street lights perhaps, or wild turkeys roaming around when a little dark spot caught my attention. It looked like a human head emerging from the bushes. But I wasn't able to see it because it was a bit in the dark. I didn't want my dog to run after whatever it was, as it had a tendency to run after wild animals, so I called it. It didn't listen to me, but the thing in the bushes started to crawl towards the street slowly. It looked like a human, with thin limbs, but a normal body and a slightly long neck. I started to freak out a bit and shook the treats cup so my dog would hurry. It came inside running, and I shut the door as fast as I could, closed the lights in my house so I could have a view of what was outside. The strange animal crawled fast, almost running like a dog with every limb broken. As it improvised a crawling movement, the animal passed under the light where I saw it had no fur as a shaved animal. It was disgusting. I was afraid and standing in the dark. The animal ran towards the light and continued on the street where I wasn't able to see it because the houses in my neighborhood were delimited by trees. I locked the door and went to sleep with my dog and spoke to no one about it. A few months later, I went to bed early at 11 p.m. and went to watch some videos on my phone. They were gaming videos and I had earphones on. The sound on the video was recurring and I thought it was annoying, like a distant weird scream. After the video finished, I went to see another, but during the loading, the sound occurred. I removed my earphones and waited for the sound and heard it and had tears in my eyes. It was coming from my window. My room is on the second floor. I looked down into the forest. If there was some movement, the only light near the forest entrance was the moonlight and an underwater light in our pool that emitted a small halo around it. I wasn't able to see anything, but the sound occurred again. It was like a mix between a distorted scream and a pig having its throat slit, or a strong pain whining from a dog. I looked down and saw an animal that passed so fast it was very hard to see, but it was human-sized with limbs crawling like a spider. It wasn't running after anything, but the sound occurred another time. It was the most horrible thing I'd ever heard. I closed my window to choke a bit of the sonority of it. I heard it again 3 other times, and it stopped after that. I spoke to my dad about the sound, and he told me it was probably a deer being attacked by a wild animal. I was so scared of it, I barely walked into the woods at night the 3 years following before moving into a city to go to university. Even this day, I have never heard of an animal like that, and made me really doubt my mental health at the time. Because I had PTSD from a dog attack in middle school, and I sometimes had light hallucinations when I gamed for too long, like a black shadow that disappears immediately or things like that. There were barely any reports of wolves, coyotes in my area. And believe me, I've made a lot of discoveries exploring the forest in this town. This is a story relayed to me by my father. Many years ago, he was doing a road trip of the States. He was driving along one night, determined to stay up. He'd been driving for about 5 hours and it was approaching midnight. Exhaustion and fatigue from the day had been getting to him, and he was starting to feel the strain at the wheel. Every moment was another fight against sleep, and he kept his eyes open, determined to stay awake, for his destination lied only a half hour away. He thought it best to pull over for a brief respite, so he pulled over on the side of the road. It was a fairly desolate place, and there were no other cars. He stopped, looked about, and it was pitch black. The moon was high in the sky, but other than that, it gave very little light for the surrounding area. He got out of his car, reached into his pocket, and fumbled retrieving a cigarette box, pulled out a cigarette and lit it while sighing deeply. He really needed to make it that next half hour. As he stood there thinking about what he was going to do tomorrow and dreaming about the comfort of a bed for the night, did he hear something in the distance? He turned his head and didn't see anything and just ignored it, assuming it was the sound of the wind. He finished his cigarette. He stood on the ember, and just as he was about to open the car door, did he look around again? That's when he saw it. The moonlight was reflecting, and there was something in the trees, something vaguely humanoid-shaped. He tried squinting. Was it a person that needed help? Why were they not approaching? But moreover, why were they standing there creepily in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night? When he realized just how odd this was, did my dad quicken his pace, threw open the car door, and closed it, feeling safety within his vehicle. He didn't even do his seatbelt up. He tore us out of there quickly and started making his way to his destination to get some sleep. He looked in his rearview mirror after a few seconds and didn't see anything, and a surge of relief washed over him. As he carried on with his drive, did he occasionally glance in the mirror, and after a few minutes he noticed it. It was following him. It was matching his speed. He was going at nearly 60 miles an hour. How could this creature be keeping up with him? My father thought he was going mad, but dared not stop to pinch himself and verify this. Put his foot on the accelerator and pumped that machine harder, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. His car was now really suffering, yet this creature seemed not to stop. Its speed matched the whole time, and as my father was putting his foot further and further to the point where it wouldn't speed up anymore, he swore he thought the creature was gaining on him. My father was absolutely bricking it. Fear, panic, and terror all consuming him within his mind. His glances back to the mirror were now frequent. His fear was overcoming him, his heart was racing, and he didn't know what to do. And just as quickly as it had started following him, did the creature vanish. It must have run off into a bush or something, or realized my father wasn't worth pursuing. He didn't stop. Speed he maintained, he carried on for several hours. He decided to forget about his little hotel for the night and kept on driving until he reached his friend's place. He passed out when he reached his house about 8 a.m. the next day. The fear fueled him all night, and he told me that he would never visit that part of the States again, and warned me that if I were to find myself down a lonely road in the middle of the night, to keep going and to be wary of my surroundings. Who knows if that creature, or whatever it might be, is still out there. How it could reach those speeds, he doesn't know, and he doesn't want to find out. He's just grateful that he got out with his life. A number of years ago, I was driving through the woods. It was dark and I needed to get home. I was absolutely exhausted after another day doing the late shift. It must have been about 2 a.m. at this point. I'm driving through a fairly secluded patch of forest when I notice that my car starts acting funny. My headlights turn off and I start playing with the buttons to try and make them turn on again, to no avail. I realize this is dangerous. I can no longer see where I'm going, and if someone, as unlikely as it is, starts coming down this road, I am in serious danger. So I pull over with the little moonlight visibility I have and park my car. There, I tried turning the engine off and on again, but once turned off, the car doesn't start. It just splutters and dies. This was in the era before cell phones, so I had two choices: walk in the dark until I found the nearest town to use a payphone, or wait it out till morning. I wasn't entirely sure which one I preferred, as it was dark and forested, and to be fair, I knew I had a very long way in either direction to get to the nearest town. So I chose to stay in the car. I reclined my seat and started getting myself comfortable. That's when I heard something in the distance, a sound like no other. A furious cry mixed in with a growl. It sounded like the scream of a fox, and at least a handful of other creatures rolled into one. This horrific primal screaming, I instantly jolted up from my reclined seat and looked out the window, scanning my surroundings. The lighting wasn't very good, and I could barely make anything out past the dark tree line. That's when I realized that if there was something out there, I was showing my face, so I instantly ducked and pretended I wasn't here. The sound happened a few minutes later, this time closer to my vehicle, and a few minutes after that, there was a definite scratching and a tapping on the back of my car. I dared not look up. If there was something there, it could obviously see me through the rear window, and I told myself I was being silly. I'm in a car. And protected. Nothing could hurt me. I slowly twist my head uncomfortably up so that I'm still laying down but looking into the back window and there's nothing there. With a pang of relief, I turn around to face the front window once more, which is where I see it. A creature the likes of which I have never seen. Tall, hairy, the mouth of a dog. It was horrific. Its long bestial limbs outstretched, far taller than a human. I have no words for what this creature was. In its own sickening way, it gave me a predatory grin, and I just about shat myself there and then. I fumbled to sit up, but was paralyzed with fear, and in a moment of bravery, as it started moving to the right of my car, as if it were going for the door, did I jolt up and spring into action. I plunged my keys into the car slot, twisted it, and by some kind of miracle, the engine revved up. I put my foot on the accelerator and darted into the night. My headlights had started to work again, and I don't think I dropped below 90 the whole way home. When I reached my house at about 4 a.m., I couldn't sleep a wink. I wasn't sure what I saw, but I'm glad I didn't stick around to find out. I know many of you are hearing this and thinking I sound absolutely insane, and trust me, if I hadn't experienced what I had, I'd be in the same boat as you, but I know what I saw, and there is something out there, and I have no intention of finding out what it is. To this day, I keep wondering what happened to come across my sister. It was wintertime here in the suburbs of North Virginia. I live with my family in a neighborhood not too far from Washington, D.C., so that's not to say we're in the middle of nowhere, although our home is very close to a few decently large wooded parks. One night, I was at my then girlfriend's place up near the city. I got a phone call from my sister around 7, which in winter makes it pretty much nighttime here. I didn't think anything of it. Usually she calls me for random things she needs my insight on. I better mock my sister. Ever since she was little, she loved horror movies. Growing up with her, I can tell you firsthand that she isn't easily scared and loves the paranormal. All right, back to the call. I picked up the phone, and first thing I realized was her voice was breaking up. She was sobbing and could barely talk clearly. Instantly, my mind started rushing with horrible thoughts about what could have happened. She kept trying to tell me to come home as soon as possible. I asked her why and if everything's okay, and she wouldn't say. She just kept asking me to come home. Obviously, I got in my car and rushed home. The neighborhood is very dim. There aren't many lights on, only the few solar panel garden lamps from surrounding homes. And as soon as I got home, I ran inside and asked her again what happened, and she finally began explaining. About half an hour before she called me, she went outside to grab a few things from her car again. It was dark out, but when the car is unlocked, the headlights turn on. When she opened the door to the car, the light was shining from the driveway onto the roof of the garage, and she noticed it from the inside of the car, a short, bipedal, human-looking thing standing on 2 jet-black muscular legs. At first, she thought it was a raccoon, but this would have been obvious to her. But this thing, it scared her to the point of crying. While she was in the car, her view was obstructed from the rest of the creature, which was crouching, and from what she described, was scratching at something on the roof trying to get in. Maybe. But she wasn't going to just stick around to find out. She got out of the car pretending to not have spotted it. This thing, it acted in a seemingly intelligent way. She thought maybe if I act like I didn't see it, it would just stay up there and not try to attack me or anything. But as she walked behind the car, she heard it stand upright. Startled, she looked directly up at it. She gave me the following description. It was jet black, smooth, dolphin-like skin with arms and legs, 5-digit hands and no claws. Dead-looking, very dirty, and hair covering its head and body. The face is what was disturbing. The face had 2 shining yellow eyes that glowed from the car's headlights. No nose, just 2 slits and a very wide mouth with no lips. She took off when she made eye contact, and as soon as she was indoors, she called 911, and an officer was dispatched to our house. He looked around back to try and see if there was any damage or any sign of someone climbing on the roof, but there were no footprints nor damage. It was all in place. The officer just told us to lock the doors and windows and left. It's not like my sister to be terrified to the point of calling the police. Whatever this thing was, though, I could only imagine what it was actually like to witness something like this in real life. To this day, both me and her get extremely uneasy, arriving home after dark, thinking that something might be waiting there for us. In high school, my buddies and I used to boat at Lake Powell during the summers, and we would camp at Lome Rock and hang out in Page, Arizona at night. One night, a local took us to the trading post on the edge of a reservation down there. On our way, our teenage tour guide was trying to spook us with some crazy native stories, telling us about the old medicine man and the lone rider. We had already heard of some bad omens, like a coyote crossing your path, but none of us were very superstitious. When we arrive, we find ourselves around several abandoned buildings, half falling apart, but still had a few walls standing. It was dark at 2 a.m., but you could see some graffiti and broken bottles on the ground. The structures weren't very tall, but instead were built down into holes in the ground. One building, we're told, was where a child had died after being locked in when her parents left and never returned. We all feel a little eerie, but jokingly try to startle each other or pretend we heard something from inside one of the dark buildings. The local who took us out there was playing along until she bolted for a car and screamed at us to get in. So we did. We peel out. And once we're back on the road, we are asking what happened. But she says she doesn't want to get into any trouble, and it's bad luck to talk about it. We think she's trying to draw us into some scary story, but she's not happy and not interested in talking about it. Once we're back in town, we're all hyped up and teasing each other about what happened. We head to the Wild Wheat Resort to sneak into the hot tubs, and I go searching for an unlocked maid's closet in one of the buildings to find some towels. And while crossing the parking lot, I see what looked to me like someone's pet husky, but it's bigger, brown, and has a small head. It was just watching me. It's a way away. I figured the owner was close by, so I think nothing of it, and I return with towels, all while we're chilling in the hot tub, 5 feet apart. 2 giant owls land on the perimeter fence behind us. Nothing too crazy. I'm the only one who takes notice. But it seems a little out of sorts, and these birds are big. The next day, we meet a native at the Taco Bell, and we're telling him about our adventure, and he warns us of the Skinwalkers. He tells us they do not like their territory being invaded and mocked. He cautioned us that they track their enemies disguised as coyotes or owls. Anyway, I don't go on late-night reservation trips anymore. When I was younger, around 7 or 8 years old, I used to sleep with my parents in their bed. Their bedroom had a computer room with a window looking out to the driveway and up the cul-de-sac. One night, it was just me and my dad sleeping in the bed. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked out the window and saw a car with its high beam lights on, pulling all the way into our driveway. I awoke my dad and told him someone was in the driveway. He went to check, as well as I, and there were no cars anywhere. He said I just dreamt it. I know I didn't, but I didn't bother making a fuss. We went back to sleep. The same night, I woke up and saw a car out on the street with its lights on, illuminating the street in front of it. I got up and looked out the window, and someone was standing there. A very tall man was standing in front of the car, motionless in front of the headlights. I was so confused. I looked out the window for a few minutes before getting back into bed. I had no idea why the man was standing out there, and I had no idea why the car's headlights were facing him. Now, this is where it gets weird. I sometimes sleep alone, admittedly scared because my parents weren't there. For some reason, I was able to sleep in that eerie room sometimes, but it always made me uncomfortable. One night, I had my first and only experience with sleep paralysis. Funnily enough, I woke up, noticed I couldn't move, and went back to sleep. There were no demons on top of me or anything I could see in the room, and when I fell back asleep, I had a dream of a tall, thin, purple figure standing over me. It had very large human-like eyes that were staring at me. I knew it wasn't human. It stood there for a while, and I was confused and curious. The figure then leaned over my bed and dissipated into the bed at the end of my feet. To this day, I think it was a form of an extraterrestrial being. It had to have been correlated to the first previous event, the car hurling into the driveway, the strange man standing out on the street. As I'm writing this, I'm not entirely sure if it was a car illuminating the tall man or if that car was actually a UFO hauling into the driveway which beamed lights towards our house. What I do know is that I think a lot about it. Now, this story takes a turn. I'm diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, which can switch over into psychosis if I become too manic. I've suffered from a psychotic break 3.5 years ago and lost my mind, during which I thought I could speak to aliens and I couldn't stop reading religious texts. One day, I was in my basement going through the psychosis and could see pink, blue, and yellow lights shining through my basement window. And you might be thinking it was the sun reflecting through the window. It was a windy, cloudy day, and the sun kept peeking through the clouds, causing the visual perception of lights to flicker in the window. Right? Well, why were there colorful lights moving in swirls and showing geometric patterns? There was a thin piece of white cardboard covering the window so I could see exactly where the lights were hitting. The cardboard was translucent enough to see these strange shapes shifting. I went to the window, took off the cardboard, and there was nothing. The lights had vanished, and all I could see were the clouds moving quickly due to how windy it was, and the sun peeking through, repeatedly causing a flickering effect. I'm well aware that I could have been hallucinating, but there is another part of the story that makes it even more interesting. For some strange reason, I was making videos of myself, joking around and being somewhat childish. But it was disturbing because I was 18 at the time, and I rewatched one of the videos and heard a disoriented moan. I did not make that sound. It came as if someone had made a moan through the microphone. It sounded like it came from an electronic device. I later deleted the video after I came back to reality. The videos were so unimaginably cringy that I deleted a lot of them. Before the psychosis had begun, I went on a nighttime walk with my mother. As we turned a corner for about a second, I saw blue glowing light in the sky. It looked as big as the size of a dinner plate. That's how close it was. As I began to point to it, I turned to my mother asking her if she sees it. As my mother turned toward me and asked me what I was talking about, the UFO retreated into the night sky like it only wanted me to see it. I told my mother what I saw, and she gave me a concerned look. I laughed at excitement because my dad had recently told me about a UFO he saw when he was younger. After that experience, I went psychotic. These events I experienced as a child and the UFO encounters I had are 100% real to me. I believe in aliens, and I believe I was contacted. I'm 21 now, haven't seen anything since. I'm properly medicated and attend therapy now. I'm more stable than I've ever been. If any aliens are hearing this, I hope you guys weren't the ones that gave me this mental illness. Over the span of a week, I've had a number of strange encounters. It started when I was sitting in a vacant lot with my buddy shooting the shit. We'd heard dogs crying and howling. We made a few jokes out of it, but then we watched a deer walk out and it just didn't look right. It looked like something trying to look like a deer. Its legs didn't move right, and it looked like it was drunk. The deer eventually takes off, and we start to hear the dogs howling and sounding distressed. I was thoroughly spooked. Being native, I've heard plenty of spooky stories about skinwalkers, and as I started to drive, we both noted a putrid smell. The following night, as we were driving through town, I smelled it again. Rotten meat is the best description I have at the moment. A deer who looks odd, like the one spotted the night before, runs out and stares at my vehicle before darting off into the darkness. As we finish driving down the streets, we hear a man scream and nope the hell out of there. We head back to his house and sit and chill on the deck and theorize about what just happened, and we hear a low whistle. As I was walking back out to my vehicle, I could hear dogs howling again. A large black dog runs out from my house and stares me down before it takes off. I drove home with just the worst feeling of dread and uneasiness. I worked the next night as a security guard and had a small area to patrol, literally 2 trailers of equipment. I had walked around the trailers once and was about to do one once more when I heard an owl very close by. I kept walking and found a large feather in between these trailers. I was just there. It was laying right where I had shined my flashlight and seen nothing. I went home and was laying in bed and heard something walking around smacking the side of my house and heard something trying to open my bedroom window. I'm trying to be as rational as I can, but I'm starting to get freaked out. Could it potentially be a skinwalker? Before I was born, my mom would dream about aliens. More specifically, she would usually dream about the spaceships. After I was born, my mom started to dream that the aliens wanted to take me. She would always be upset in the dream, but apparently the people around her would tell her it's okay. She has to go. Fast forward a few years and I'm around 12. My mom wakes up in the middle of the night feeling like she can't go back to sleep. She goes to the window and stares out of it. I wasn't there, so I can't corroborate this. But she says she saw a light in the sky zip from side to side making no noise. Then it hovered over the house across the street for a while. Supposedly it was there long enough for her to wake up my stepdad so he could come and look. He admitted seeing it at the time, but didn't want to talk about it later. He was very no-nonsense, very skeptical. Anyway, it eventually shot up and out of sight. Maybe this is nothing. Who knows? So then, a few years later, I have the first alien-related dream that I could vividly remember. I was at my grandpa's house in this clearing, staring up at the night sky, waiting for something. Then, the sky turns purple, and a massive spaceship comes over the clearing. It's all black with light coming from windows around the sides of it. I run to my car and the dream ends. Maybe a year after that, I wake up and there were 2 perfectly cut triangles in my sheets. These were brand new flannel sheets I had been given at Christmas. I still keep that sheet because it freaks me out. Maybe there was a flaw in the fabric from the beginning and it just ripped. It felt odd though, especially when I learned that many people report triangular body marks after an abduction. Then, the strangest dream happens. I was about 19 or 20 years old. I was walking downtown when all of a sudden I was lifted into the air and my body starts to vibrate violently. Kind of like a cartoon character. When they get electrocuted, I flew through the air like this for a while, and then I was dropped off back at my porch. I was yelling, but no sound came out, and then I looked down at my hand, and there was a piece of metal and some wires sticking out. So I ripped it out of my hand, and the dream ended. Although there was no specific alien contact in the dreams, I woke up thinking, my goodness, aliens. It felt so real. It was as if I was conscious through the dream. The last odd occurrence was 3 years ago. My mom started dating a guy and they were talking, and one night he said, I think I know what one of your fears is. And my mom was like, okay. And he said, you're afraid your daughter will be abducted by aliens. So my mom is obviously shaken, and he says to not be afraid, that they always bring her back, don't they? My mom, still to this day, has not shared the whole conversation with me. My mom, my sister-in-law, and I are all lying on the ground watching the Perseids meteor shower. I see a plane in the sky, only its lights aren't blinking like they normally would in a plane. Hey guys, I think that might actually be a satellite. And since this is the age of technology and instant answers, my mom pulls out her smartphone, looks up a list of visible satellites passing over our location that night, and it turns out that plane is actually the International Space Station reflecting sunlight back at us, which is totally wicked cool. And there's supposed to be another satellite passing over in about an hour or something. So I'm like, oh yeah, let's find it. But not in so many words since, I'm talking to my mom. Anyway, we continue to watch the meteor shower for the next 15 minutes or whatever. And while keeping an eye out for this next satellite to make its sluggish way across the sky, it hasn't even been a half hour yet when I swear I see another non-blinking plane-like object in the sky in the general direction of the magic satellite chart. But like, okay, maybe it's ahead of schedule. Cool. And we're all standing up, walking around to get a better view because, trees and whatnot. And all three of us are staring intently at this satellite, probably not even blinking. When it starts getting bigger and the sudden realization hits us that it's not getting bigger, it's getting closer. Like, holy hell, it's going to crash and we're all going to die. I've never burnt those stupid notebooks from 7th grade. That's going to be my only legacy. I'm about to ditch my family and bucket the hell out of there. My sister-in-law, who is scared out of her mind of stuff like this and anything that's out of her control, is running in circles like in the cartoons. All the while, my mom just starts standing there, chill as hell, when this thing changes its mind and turns the hell around and starts moving away from us and slowly starts to disappear. Minutes later, we saw the satellite we were originally looking for come in from one of the edges of the horizon and disappear over the other. I don't know what the hell that first thing was, but it didn't move fast and direct like a meteor, and it didn't blink or emit noises like a plane. My mom's convinced it was some kind of test flight of a military aircraft since there's a military camp nearby. And I'm inclined to agree with her, but my sister-in-law swears she felt the air get hot as it moved closer. I did too, and I just chalk it up to adrenaline. My fiance and I are hugely into camping. This particular season where the incident happened, we discovered the perfect little hideaway clearing way out in the Crown Land, about an hour west and north of Cremona. We had made about 6 trips out there already, some with large groups of friends and some with just a couple of us. So we were starting to become quite familiar with the area we're exploring. This specific trip was a bigger one. We had about 10 people with us, one of whom is my lifelong best friend of 18 years. To add a little bit of context to this, my best friend and I strongly believe in extraterrestrials and paranormal events. So much so that we successfully signaled a UFO on a beach when we were 12. But that's a story for another time. My best friend and I, Kaylee, were talking about the UFO on the beach around the campfire with everyone. A choice few people were more interested than others. 5 of us decided it would be a really cool and super smart idea to try signaling something again. Before we used a flashlight to create a specific pattern of flashes into the sky, so why not try again? I remember the pattern, and after all, we grabbed a few flashlights, laid down near the beach, and began flashing lights into the sky. The first few minutes consisted of nothing but our half-inebriated giggles. But then Kaylee spoke up and asked if we were seeing what she was. We all focused hard on the sky, and lo and behold, there was a flickering light twice as prominent as the other stars, even Venus. I staggered in all directions for a few seconds before setting on a steady trail over the tree line until we couldn't see it anymore. Thoroughly spooked, we jogged back to camp to tell everyone else what happened. Of course, most of them brushed it off as us acting like little drunks. But we all saw the exact same thing. Strange lights in the sky forgotten, we spent the next few hours around the fire with everyone. One of the more skeptical guys in the group went off to pee, but stopped right at the entrance to the clearing and said something along the lines of, "What is that?" which caused the rest of us to see what he was looking at. Just a quick pause to set the scene. Our clearing that we camped in is smaller, only about 30 feet, set back into a tree line roughly 15 to 20 yards from the dirt road that runs through the crown land. Directly across the road from our spot is a small river backing out onto the thick forest and low mountains for miles. When we got to the entrance, we saw a massive, brilliant spotlight shining over the highest mountain peak across the road. It almost looked like the sunrise, except it was 1 a.m. and entirely in the wrong direction. Someone's immediate reaction was to say it was a truck, but that was quickly discounted because we knew the roads and the trails around there, and they certainly didn't go up the mountain. Another theory was that it might have been a combine since there are plenty of farms around the area. More likely, except this light was so big, it looked like the source would have had to have been as big as a medium-sized yacht. As we were arguing about the possibilities, the light started to slowly beam across the mountain like it was moving sideways. Definitely not a combine. The light would have had to have pointed in the direction it was moving instead of focusing on our direction the whole time, just slowly riding left and right. We all started staring at it in awe, at this weird light for about 10 more seconds, until it darted back across the ridge to its original position. All the while still shining towards us. It moved way too fast for our vehicle or farm equipment, and we no longer had any theories of what it was coming from. A very few short seconds after it stopped, it faded away so slowly you couldn't even tell it was dimming unless you looked away for a second or two. Eventually, it disappeared completely. Thoroughly creeped out and chilled to the bone from the early September weather, we quickly made our way back to the fire. None of us can explain the light we saw that night, but it definitely left us all with a very uneasy feeling. I had nightmares the remaining 2 nights we were there, but there were no more unexplainable events after that. I remember growing up that I used to spend a few weekends at my grandparents' place. They lived on the reservation, not too far from the Bitsty Wilderness. My grandpa used to have these 3 dogs. He called them his protectors. He used to tell me that they were his alarm system, and they would alert him if anything approached the house. He told me that something would visit them at night, and the dogs would go crazy, bark, and chase something around the house at night. My grandpa had asked me to start digging large holes in the ground so that he could bury the dogs' houses underground. My grandpa said that it would give the dogs an advantage at night. Whatever came at night wouldn't be able to see them until it was too late. Several days went by, and it was quiet. Nothing visited the house at night, but one moonless night, it was very dark, I heard the first dog to the north barking. He started to make a growling sound, and it sounded like he was fighting something. I heard the 2 other dogs come running up to help the other one. I heard a yelp, and by then my grandpa was already up and shot his rifle in the air. Whatever came that night had left, and the dogs settled down. The next morning, we found blood and some long hair around the dog's house, and my grandpa found a finger that had a turquoise ring still on the finger. He believed that a dog had ripped off the finger of a skinwalker. After my parents had heard about the commotion, I couldn't stay there much longer and I had to leave. About a week later, the dogs had died. 2 of them had died from their skin being torn from their bodies, and the other one was decapitated. My grandparents had to enlist the help of a medicine man to keep the skinwalker away. Let me take you back 5 months when the whole Storm Area 51 craze was happening. It was on the news and I was sitting there with my grandma. Unbothered, she looks at me and goes, aliens landed on our local beach in the 70s. They keep their ship hidden under the sand. That's why we haven't had hurricanes since. Now listen, y'all. My grandma is very old school, conservative, religious, and doesn't even joke around. When she said this, I thought she was joking. But she went back to watching the news like she hadn't said anything. And for context, my aunt is one of my neighbors. Later, when I went to check my mail, I saw my aunt sitting on her lawn and went to tell her what Grandma said. Again, unbothered, my aunt goes, "Yeah, that's true. That's why part of the beach is sectioned off." I thought for sure this was some kind of elaborate prank. But later I saw another neighbor and told them the craziness and they agreed. I looked it up and there were a bunch of news stories from the town claiming that the major reason storms won't hit my area, even though we're in a high-risk zone for hurricanes, is because of the aliens protecting their ship. Last night, my fiance and I saw something so weird. We were driving to Charlotte from Florida, We passed by some town, I think it was York, and we were on the interstate. We noticed something that looked like 3 street lights kind of in a triangle form. However, we didn't see the pole. It was in a construction zone, so I expected it to be just random construction stuff. We were driving for maybe 5 minutes, and we never actually got closer to the lights. I was keeping a close eye on them because it had now caught my attention. A fast light came from the left of the sky that was kind of smaller, zooming across, and then a 90-degree angle swooped down right in front of the 3 lights. Then the furthest light on the end suddenly got 3 times its original size and dissolved, aka got super small all of a sudden while zooming to the top and right of the sky. The 2 were still there, but then faded and zoomed to the top left of the sky. I can't really understand what I saw, but I swear on my life I've never seen any plane go as fast as they went and the angles that they zoomed at so sharply. I was about 14 years old when this first thing happened to me. I was home alone during the holidays. I got a few inches of snow where I lived. I was looking out the window and saw deer tracks right by my house. I noticed that they were very close to my house, so I walked outside to check it out when I first saw the normal deer prints. But as the steps got closer to my house, the strides got longer and longer. Then finally, as I got to the back door, I looked down and saw that the animal tracks looked nothing like an animal, as if it started to walk on 2 legs. It looked almost as if it were a human footprint that were about the size of mine. I froze and looked around to see the footprints continued around my house until they walked right back into the woods. I've taken a video of what I found but deleted it because I thought no one would ever believe me, as it was hard to see the prints in the video. I never spoke about it until this next event. This was April 2018. I am 18 years old and woke up at 4 a.m. one night and was very confused as to why. I didn't have a dream that would wake me, and right as I started to fall back asleep, I began to hear this drumming. It sounded like something close to tribal drumming that you hear in old Western movies that's featured in Native Americans. I woke up with fear and rolled away from the window and pulled the covers over my head. I heard it closer and closer to my window. I could hear my brother from the other room yelling for help. My dad comes downstairs trying to figure out what's wrong when I hear him stop mid-sentence to observe the noise. He went right around my house to my brother's window and then just stopped. I went to sleep as soon as it ceased. My oldest brother came up to me the next day and asked me if I heard the drumming, along with my dad and my brother's girlfriend at the time. To add to how creepy the whole thing was, I went outside to investigate what happened, and we saw not only footprints to my window of my brother's, but no indication of where it went once it stopped playing. We also saw by the mailbox that whatever was playing the drums sat down before coming to my window. Now I knew what a skinwalker was before the 2 events happened, and I'm convinced that somehow these 2 events are related. It was 4 years apart, but I just can't shake the feeling of these 2 things that happened at my house. What I'm about to share is something that occurred to me when I was young, around 7. I'm 21 now, and I still have no idea what I saw. Me and my mom stayed at my uncle's house when we went to Mexico, and during the daytime, it was nothing close to scary. The room we stayed in had a window that covered the entire back wall, so when we opened the curtains, we had a clear view of the road and the woods behind the house. It was around 10 p.m. when I was in bed ready to go to sleep. Suddenly, I had the urge to look out the window. I looked up and back out the window because obviously I was laying down, so my head was tilted. I saw 5 lights, all different colors, circling the neighbor's house in the woods behind us. In Mexico, they're what my mom called witches or lechuzas, but I don't think that's what they were. I also don't think it was aliens or a UFO. They all had their own motion and speed. They weren't synchronized. I woke up my mom and she saw them as well. She told me to go close the curtains and ignore it. Well, when she was asleep, I decided to get up and open the door, which was on the opposite side of the window facing the front of the house. As soon as I opened it, I saw another light. It was right in front of me. It was not close, but it was straight ahead and appeared to be hovering only a few feet above the ground. It was glowing a yellowish orange. I closed the door, of course, scared as hell, and I stared at it from behind the door. I stayed there for a solid 5 minutes, and then the light slowly dimmed out. I have no clue what I experienced that night. Has anyone else gone through something similar? What was it that I saw? I was visiting my cousin's house. I have 4 cousins, 2 twin girls aged 10, and then the older brother aged 21 and other older brother aged 26. I was sleeping in the room with the cousin of my age, 21. We heard things falling in the girls' room right next to where we were. We assumed it was just them playing, but one of them started talking to the other and they were across the room. So my cousin stepped out of the room to go check, and I watched over his shoulders through the doorway. Right as the girls were explaining that stuff was falling without provocation, a sort of humanoid type thing came bursting out the closet. It looked human-esque, but was much longer and thinner and ran on all four legs. It ran out the house, broke the front door hinge, and straight through the screen door. We called the police immediately, and they were there within 5 minutes. They looked in a 5-mile radius, and nothing was found. They gathered DNA from the door, as apparently the thing was cut by shattering wood on the door, as there was still a small amount of blood on it. They ran tests, and it was determined to be inconclusive. They said it was similar to human DNA, but not in the way ape DNA is similar. It wasn't a human, though. They knew that much. So to this day, we have had no incidents with whatever this thing is. They still live in the house, have no problems, but we have zero explanation for what happened and what the thing was and how it got into the house. This morning, I left the house early, 4:45 to be exact. I had an early appointment and needed to drive about 3 hours to get to my destination. I usually take the main roads, but I decided to take the back roads that drive through an Indian reservation. That road would save me about 45 minutes, and I would have plenty of time when I get to my appointment. I have heard the stories about skinwalkers, and I never thought I'd see one. This morning, I'm sure I did. I was driving about 60 on a reservation road when I came across a herd of horses. I slowed down, thinking that a horse might cross my path and that I might have an accident. I didn't see any other cars on that road. Something caught the corner of my eye. It was something shadowy and moving beside my car. I turned to look at it, and it was just outside my view, and I looked into the mirror. That's when I saw her face. It looked like an old woman. The face was painted white. It looked horrible. It was ghastly, very wicked, and ugly looking. I looked away and screamed and slammed on the gas. I was in full panic with no intention of looking back, and I kept driving as quickly as I could. I was a mess. I wanted to cry and pull over and try to get some composure, but I wouldn't dare stop on that road. I finally made it to the main road, and I felt at ease that there were more cars on the road. My heart was racing, and I was having a panic attack. I'll never take that road again. I have no idea what I saw, but I'm guessing that it was a skinwalker. Somewhere between June 27th, 1980 and April 23rd, 1981, I had a strange experience. This experience is the one that I have the most difficulty discussing with people. Part of the difficulty is that it was an experience that still frightens me when I think of it. The other part is the fear of people thinking I'm crazy. Of course, by sharing it with all of you, I am defeating that fear. We were living in Aberdeen, Maryland on an army base. Not quite sure what a Marine was doing on an army base. We lived in military housing on the base. The house was a 2-story brick townhouse, and all of the houses on the base looked the same. I had a large bedroom and a king-size bed all to myself. On this night, I was sleeping. At the time, I slept with the light on, but dimmed because I was afraid of the dark. I woke up in the middle of the night and had an urge to play my kid-sized electric piano. I crawled out of bed and quietly walked to the piano across the room. I turned it on and sat back down on the bed while it warmed up. When I was certain that it was ready, I walked back to the piano and pushed the 2 lowest keys. I believe that Tofa, my husband, told me a few weeks ago that these are usually A and B notes. The notes let out this low, depressive moan. I held the keys down for a while, not sure how long, and when I let go, I turned and looked at my closet. Standing there in my closet and reaching out for me were 4 beings. They had pale, slightish gray skin. They had large black eyes. 2 slits made their nose, and non-existent ears and small mouths. They were all reaching out to me with their 4-digited hands. They wore black jumpsuits, and on the front of the jumpsuit was a metallic silver triangle logo. Top pointed down and emblazoned across the triangle was a blue metallic lightning bolt. They didn't move towards me. They just stood there at the door of the closet, reaching towards me. I ran towards the bed, hid my head under the covers, and began to scream. Instantly, my mom and dad were there, asking what was going on. I explained to them that the Coneheads were coming after me. I'm sure I had seen the Coneheads on Saturday Night Live at some point, and they were the only things that I remotely related to what I had seen, though they were nowhere close. I told them that I had played my piano, and then all of a sudden the coneheads were reaching for me from my closet. Mom stayed in the bed to comfort me, while Dad walked over to the piano and pushed a key. Sure enough, the piano was on. As the key made the note, I told my dad to stop or they'd return. I don't know if I even went to sleep with my parents that night, or if I managed to fall back asleep after they spent some time with me, assuring me that there weren't coneheads in the closet. The next morning, my dad took the piano outside and smashed it with a sledgehammer. In hindsight, I find that to be a rather odd reaction. It wasn't until years later, while I was in junior high, that I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, that I happened to see an illustration of what had appeared in my closet. These illustrations were from people who were abducted by aliens. My mom and sister were asleep when I was watching this show, and my dad was deployed in Kuwait for the Persian Gulf War. Upon seeing the images, I dropped to my knees and began shaking and crying. The images were exactly what I had seen, except most of the images of the Greys didn't have clothes on. Until finally, there was one image, a drawing of a Grey wearing a black jumpsuit, and on the jumpsuit was a triangle insignia. No lightning bolt, though. From time to time, I mention that night to my parents, and they have absolutely no recollection of me screaming my head off about the coneheads. They do remember the destruction of my piano, though. Was I abducted? I don't know. Why did they come to me? Did pushing the lowest note on my piano call them, or was it just a coincidence? Will they come back? Originally, I would tell you that I hope they had not, but maybe if they did, maybe I could get the answers that I have been looking for. Out back of my own 30-acre property, there was a big grove of eucalyptus trees. I was walking out there to get to the river because me and my friends were going to drink some beer and generally chill by the river. But when we walked by the trees that I've walked by thousands of times before with no weirdness, I thought we saw a little kid peeking out from one of the bigger trees. So I told my friends to look right there where the kid, or whatever it was hiding, and about a 4-foot-tall humanoid thing peeked out with its pale white, like grayish color. It had a weird head, and honestly, that's about as descriptive as I could be. As the moment I saw it, my hair stood up, and I ran as fast as I could back to my house to grab a gun. We still go past those trees to get to the river, but never do so without firearms. I wish I had not been so scared because I feel like I should have filmed it. A number of years ago, I was coming home late at night. I was driving and minding my own business. I had just been seeing a friend. It couldn't have been past 11. And as I was making my way across the road doing the 15-minute journey back home, do I notice something in the distance? Lights flickering in the sky. Bear in mind, this is the 1980s, and I understand it to be a plane and think nothing more of it. As I continue my journey through the winding countryside, do the lights start to become a bit brighter? I wonder if they're getting closer, which is slightly concerning, but I try to put it to the back of my mind as I'm nearly home. But within a very short amount of time, the lights shoot ever closer towards my direction, until I think they're gone. And finally, I look up and notice that they are above me. It's at this point I just about crap myself. I have no idea what's about to happen. I keep driving, unsure of what to do, and the lights are completely silent, flashing down on my vehicle. I try driving faster, but they noiselessly and effortlessly keep speed. I'm starting to get terrified. What is this? Who are they? What do they want? I drive home as quickly as I can, and just when I'm about to round the corner to pull into our driveway, the lights are gone. I pull up, exit my vehicle, and look out into the sky. I can't see anything. Was it all in my head? I try and hope that it is. I try and dismiss the whole event and forget it ever happened. When a few days later, I'm meeting up with my friend, and he looks at me and is rather pale. I ask him what's up, and he tells me in a confidential tone that something strange happened to him. He says he saw lights in the sky and that they chased him while he was driving. I look at him in incredulity and confess the same thing happened to me. I asked him what noise the thing made, and he said it was completely silent, and it was one of the scariest encounters of his life. Upon realizing we both had the same event, we kept it quiet. We didn't want people to think us crazy. We tried not to speak of it again, but it's always played on my mind what we really saw and what was following us in our small town. This was at about 3:35 in the afternoon, and it was clear as day, obviously. And I live in Harriman, Utah. It's known for skinwalkers, especially Skinwalker Ranch, but I am very sure of what I saw. My mom and I had just got back from picking me up from school, and we also got McDonald's on our way back. My house has these huge windows that face the mountain because we basically live on it, and there are only a few other things behind us. But I was just enjoying eating my McDonald's and watching the TV when I saw a large, dark figure running on the mountain. This thing was taller than the trees, which were about 8 feet tall, and was running faster than a human can through trees and sagebrush-type weeds. At first, I thought nothing of it because I assumed it must be an elk or something. Then I realized it was running on 2 legs, and the last time I checked, elk or deer don't run on 2 legs. I began freaking out, and to this day, still don't know what it was. I ran to get my stepdad's binoculars, but it was already too late. Could it be a skinwalker? When I was in high school, I had a dream one night where I was driving with my parents down an old back road in the middle of the night. A star fell from the sky and landed in an open field where I was overcome with a bright white light. Next thing I remember, I was on a cold, very hard metal table with 2 gray humanoid-looking creatures standing over me. Here's the thing I remember so vividly. I could see the reflection of the lights in their huge black eyes. The one on my right said something in these click sounds to the humanoid on my left, and they looked at each other. They were wearing white lab coats. I was in a huge white room, overhead lighting seeming to come from nowhere. An ear-splitting scream came from my right shoulder. When I turned and looked, there was a woman who looked like she'd just given birth and blood was everywhere. I did not see the child she birthed. There was another humanoid creature in the way. For some reason or another, I don't know if I was told telepathically or if it was just a sense of knowing and understanding, but I knew I was next to give birth. Keep in my mind, I'm a 16-year-old virgin from high school. Never even kissed a boy. Should not be pregnant in any way, shape, or form. I then woke up. Nothing weird about my day. I go to school, but in my last period I heard this girl telling her friend that last night she saw a star fall from the sky and explode in a white light. I just about crapped myself right there and then. I still have no explanation for what happened. This happened a few years ago when I was mountain walking. We started as a large group, but after some time of everyone choosing their own pace, I ended up walking by myself. I was walking downhill through a thick forest area when I slipped on an unstable part of the trail and I slid on my butt to where the path goes straight. Before I could get up, a deer walks out of the trees on my left and stands in front of me. This was not natural because deers usually avoid human contact. Something was really off about this deer and I wasn't sure what it was. Its eyes looked lifeless and its aura was that of unease. Then it opened its mouth to show multiple rows of what looked like razor-sharp teeth and made an ear-shattering scream. It sounded like nothing I had ever heard before or since. It sounded unreal, like it shouldn't exist. I watched quite a lot of horror movies and I'm yet to come across a scream this demonic. After the scream ended, it closed its jaw and walked away to the other side of the woods. I never told this story to anyone before. I've heard the stories of other mountain walkers, and anyone who shares stories like this gets labeled as insane. But I know what I saw. Hell, I can't forget. No matter how much I try, and it still gives me a shiver to this day. This story has been passed down through my family. They called it the Indian's Devil. All I know is that my great-great-great-grandfather was courting his wife and had to walk 12 miles up the old island road. The story goes that something jumped out of the trees at him. It had the hands and feet and face of a man, but the body of an ape. It followed him for miles, mocking him and then running away. The local Aboriginal people call it a devil, and always told their children to stay close or it might snatch them. They knew this thing. So I asked Grampy what happened, and he said that my great-great-great-grandpa was so upset that he took to his bed for 4 days. He then got a bunch of men together and they tracked it down and shot it. One time, I was out in the back with my uncle stargazing. I saw what looked like a shooting star, and I said, "Look." My uncle turned around and missed it, but we saw something else. It was a dark, dim, red, kind of ellipse-shaped object. It moved across the sky at a slightly faster than airblade speed, but slower than a shooting star. At this point, it looked to me like a floating amber. I expected it to fall. It went about halfway across the sky and stopped completely for a whole second, maybe 2, and then moved at a right angle to the right, twirled around a bit, and shot across the sky to the left. It went really, really fast. As it reached the other side of the sky, my eyes began to lose focus. I can't see it anymore, I said. My uncle, who had been following with me all this time, pointed to it further down. I acknowledged it and pointed to it further up. It was doing a loop-de-loop and twists and turns all over that little part of the sky and then faded away. I would have thought I imagined it had my uncle not been there. He was not just going along with me because at times he pointed it out, and that's where I saw it. We have ruled out meteorite shooting stars, planes, and birds and such, because they don't come to a dead stop, don't turn so easily at an angle, don't fly erratically, and don't fly at that speed. It was a UFO. Alien or not, it was weird. Later that night, I heard what sounded like a plane flying low over my house, but it sounded unfamiliar, more high-pitched than a usual jet. I looked out and saw lights, but it was a row of red and green and white and a vertical line flying away from me ahead of my house. In my mind, it resembled an aircraft carrier at sea, but they don't fly, right? Especially not where I live. While I believe in life elsewhere, I don't believe they would pay us visits anytime soon. If anyone could offer any explanation, I would appreciate it. I live in the countryside, in an old cottage on its own, surrounded by forest and fields. There's a dirt road about 8 miles long, which takes you to a small town called Bampton in Oxfordshire. It was about 11 p.m., and I went out with my dog to take him on a walk as I had been at work all day and hadn't done it yet. So, anyway, we were going down the dirt road when my dog froze, and no matter how many times I said his name, he ignored me. All of a sudden, I turned to see this deer thing looking at me, half-dead face, and it had blood and flesh falling off its leg. It had a bone showing, and it stared at me for what felt like 8 minutes before it jumped on its back legs, sort of like how a horse does, then ran away on all fours. I ran back to my house, and when I got there, I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the direction of the woods. I was scared, to say the least. What the hell was that? About 2 years ago, as a junior in college, I saw something that is quite inexplicable. It was a Friday night, and, like most every other weekend, I was driving to my hometown, which was only about a 45-minute trip. It was around midnight when I began to see the general glow of lights from my city as I approached my hometown on the interstate. As I was looking at the glow of my town, 3 vibrant green lights appeared in the night sky, way out in the distance in front of me and well above the city. These 3 lights were equidistantly lined up on top of each other and were strangely vivid. All 3 lights zoomed from about the middle of my field of vision in the car, and then to the left before disappearing. It was only about 2 or 3 seconds, but the lights quite obviously covered quite a bit of distance in a very short amount of time. After seeing this short but quite amazing display, I burst out in a fit of obscenities. I've always been a skeptic towards UFOs or anything paranormal, and I've never looked for anything of the sort. But there was no denying that I had seen something wholly mystifying that night that I will never forget. This wasn't a result of some kid shooting a laser pointer in the sky, and the visual display was certainly not from any nearby buildings. I'm completely positive that it wasn't any sort of commercial aircraft due to the fact at the time and because I was living in rural Arkansas at the time. It's very hard to articulate exactly what I saw that night, and as a result, no one ever shares in my astonishment. It was certainly one of those things where you would have just had to have been there. Oh, and I was definitely not under the influence of any drugs. Figured I should just point that out. It was our second year in our new house in the suburbs, specifically in the Philippines, Cagayan de Oro City. I was 8 years old when I first discovered that the thing I thought just exists in stories was actually true, and I experienced it. It was a Sunday afternoon when we were told to get our butts moving because we were going to go to the mall. I was excited and happy that after a long weekend, I could go to spend a day at the mall playing at the arcade. So normally I would get too excited and active. I took a shower and was so loud and noisy, and little did I know stuff was about to hit the fan. I was asking my babysitter if she saw where my shirt was, and she pointed it out to my left side. And when I tried to look towards where my shirt was, my head slowly tilted to the right. I didn't bother it at first, and naturally I tried to move my head straight. But to my inconvenience, a very sharp pain took my neck slowly and slowly. I couldn't do anything but tilt my head to the right. I shouted to everyone in the house for help, and my babysitter rushed to me. At first, she thought I was joking till she realized that I was in pain. So what we did was go to my grandma's sister to check on me, and she replied she was annoyed by my antics, that I was too noisy, so slapping me was enough to make me realize my rudeness. A duende is a dwarf-like creature in Filipino folklore. From what I remember, there are two types of them, the ones that are mostly good and the evil types. And to my stupid luck, I pissed off one of the bad ones. After we visited my grandmother's sister, we eventually went into the mall. I ate KFC, and I specifically remember what I ate. It was spaghetti. I think they only serve that in the Philippines, by the way. After that, we went home. A few days later, I can tilt my head a bit further to the other side and look like a normal person again. My mom heard what happened to me and told my babysitter to offer a black native chicken as a peace offering for my misdeeds. Then the day after, I was back to normal. After the encounter, we let our house be blessed by a magnamite, a witch doctor but specializing in healing instead of hurting, and nothing bad paranormal ever happened there again. I was around 7 or 8, and every morning when I would wake, I would go into my grandma's room and lay in bed with her until she awoke. One morning, I go in and get the blankets and lay down with her. I look over, and next to the dresser in front of the closet are two 6 to 8 inch little men. I just stared at them frozen because I was terrified. I finally closed my eyes and hoped they would go away. I opened them up and they were gone. I've always wondered if what I saw was real, but I can picture it so vividly, like I can even remember what they were wearing. One had a red shirt and the other had an orange shirt. I'm 30 now, and to this day I am profoundly terrified of garden gnomes, like panicky, sweaty, and racing heart kind of scared. Any idea what they could have been, or if I have a good reason to be afraid of them? You made it to the end. Not everyone does. If you want more terrifying encounters like these, give this video a like, subscribe, and we'll meet again in the next nightmare.